Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're looking at the Pinball Arcade. You can see on the copyright here that this game is from FarSight Studios and it was copyrighted 2018. I'm now playing this in 2021. What happened probably about 30 years ago, if not longer, was the Pinball Arcade had a bunch of great licenses for the good virtual recreations of the very popular very historically relevant pinball tables that existed in the past, from things like Stern, Gottlieb. There's probably one that I'm not thinking of. But right about that time, the licenses left Pinball Arcade and went on to Pinball FX, which at the time was probably Pinball FX2. There is now Pinball FX3, which is pretty much just forward compatible. But Pinball FX, at least at the time, was mostly known for making new pinball tables that were more arcadey and more video gamey, instead of something that was trying to emulate the actual act of putting a pinball on a table and playing something in a real world scenario. Unfortunately, since then, there still really hasn't been a good, efficient way to convert anything like Pinball Arcade back to feeling like playing pinball for real. There are some ways to do it, but they're very expensive, and your mileage varies greatly because you end up looking at a monitor, and the graphics are just not there. Ray tracing could potentially in the future fix that. Getting reflections on a metal ball on a table might increase the quality of the graphics, but frankly, we also would need people to literally be able to 3D scan the tables and get much higher resolution images. So, my point here, as this plays music, as to why I've come back is, well, I pretty much forgot about it. I totally did not ever, after the last time we looked at Pinball Arcade and I hadn't purchased any of the tables, I did purchase the tables right as they were leaving the license, which was nice. They did give you a little bit of warning, so I spent a whole bunch of money and then I totally forgot about it and I never came back and played it ever again. So that puts me in a weird position, but I'm actually in a weird position today anyways, because at the current moment I am day 2 into my internet being completely offline, and for the most part pinball does not require the internet. You can certainly in Pinball Arcade log in and do official tournaments and online plays, but there's no need to do that. We can just play. I could also certainly go through like all of season 1 in challenge mode, and that would have me go through each of the tables that were bought for the season 1 DLC, and I could certainly do that for all the way down to season 6. Pretty much I don't think after they lost the licenses they've added that many new tables, which in all fairness they kind of have as many as you would ever remember. You could also break this down into whether you want to play Williams or Bailey or Stern tables for season 1. I imagine is how that really breaks down. Yeah, so you could focus there if there was a specific love for one of the brands. But I don't think, for me, that's the way we should go through this. I will highlight that while I do own all of these tables, there are some tables that seem to just not have pro elements in them. And there is actually one expansion here. And again, this may just be a case of if my internet was connected. So 4 tables here are purchasable, or you can play a trial version of it. You have Big Buck Hunter Pro, which or you have Mustang, or you have the um, Star Trek movie reboot series. And then you have one called Whoa Nelly, which is a country girl in Daisy Duke cutoffs with melons in front of her. So there's like 4 unknown tables versus a whole bunch of tables. And we'll just play a table and see if that takes long enough to make an episode. There is, I suppose, now that you have this problem of abundance and decadence, frankly, by not having ever played this. You can see I haven't done any of the goals as far as standard goals, let alone the wizard goals, which are table goals. And we'll look into those and get a general idea there. We could sort by year, and I think that's the best move, is we'll just go through years and play the oldest tables to the newest tables. Going by pack doesn't really make the best sense. Going by manufacturer doesn't really make the best sense. Going alphabetical doesn't really make the best sense. Pinball Arcade was designed to be kind of a living program, so it's something that would just constantly get content, and it pretty much did until it didn't, which is better than most pinball games, where the vast majority of pinball games, with the exception of Pinball FX, which is the only real competitor to Pinball Arcade, is the vast majority of pinball games give you 1 to maybe 3 tables, and that's it for their entire life. There is no commitment or desire to add more content, and certainly with the exception of Pinball Arcade and Pinball FX, there was no desire to license anything. Generally speaking, I did not really like the way Pinball FX2 controlled, but by this point Pinball FX3 could control particularly fine. So we have Central Park here. This is more than likely a woody style table, with in the sense that it's actually made of wood. Central Park is in the 1966 is considered to be one of the best playing classic tables. Featured a comical back glass animation of a monkey ringing a bell every 100 points scored. Pinball Hall of Famers consider mastering table nudging and target shooting on this table to be essential to proving one's expertise at playing classic tables. 3,100 units of this table were produced. It's also worth mentioning that a vast majority of woody tables were burnt in an anti-gambling kind of tirade or agenda, where they were claiming pinball was gambling. So you can see by the audio, it's just making dinging sounds, no music playing for this game, and you can see that this is a fairly simplistic table. They're not going to have any crazy shots. The graphics definitely look like they're from the 1960s. In all fairness, this is probably a artistic restoration of what it originally looked like, because by the time anybody would have even been able to make a good scan of a game like this, I imagine all the ink would have been faded and everything would have looked horrible. So there's something to that. Now, as far as, since you have a pro options, you can come to the pro menu. Normally you could do the game setup. We can look at the flyer if we want to. You get these little extras that we can then zoom in. Yeah. Let's see. It's not particularly the best system. Yeah, this game is labeled as having partial controller support, and I would say that's pretty much true. We read the table history. You have room brightness and bulb brightness and sound menus. And like, let's see what else, other settings. We could turn off tilt. I guess turn on tilt. I guess in this game it's not turned on by default. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't have a tilt. Turn off vibration. Then camera settings, multiple camera, event camera, lock camera. All little tweaks, but not anything amazing. But there really isn't that much amazing to check. Alright. So for standard goals, the thing you want to do to unlock the standard goals would be to light the yellow and green pop bumper, score at least 500 points with one ball, increase yellow target to 30 points, increase green target to 30 points, and score at least 1,000 points. And if those are the standard goals, I imagine that is a very low scoring game. And then there's just no pro version available for this table, which I guess maybe they couldn't have thought of anything. Now, one thing I can do is if I use the D-pad, it's moving the cursor up and down at the top, but it is also switching between a large collection of pinball skins you can have. Honestly, I think the pinball skins are pretty stupid, but it is, I suppose, one way for them to give you something extra, or for you to potentially even support Pinball Arcade a little bit more. Although, arguably at this point, being so late to the party, supporting Pinball Arcade isn't highly likely to unlock any new tables. What I'm not seeing, and maybe that's again because I'm not connected to the internet, what I've not heard of or any new announcements per se for brand new tables to show up either at Pinball FX3 or Pinball Arcade. So they both have either lost any licenses that they might have gotten, or the last few remaining pinball table designers are just completely unwilling to make digital versions of their real tables because they're making, I assume, a little bit more money by selling the tables in the real world. And A starts instead of the start button starting, which is interesting. Let's just make sure we can figure out what is moving what. Okay, so the left stick tilts up, down, left, right. Well, it nudges, and the right stick pulls the plunger, and the left trigger and right trigger, you do the flippers. Alright, I can see immediately that this is going to be a low scoring version of a game that definitely will need a lot of nudging, and I'm not particularly the biggest nudger out there, but that the very high loss rate here. Now, I'm not sure if this is a 5-ball or, yeah, it's a 5-ball table. But yeah, what you want to do is probably nudge that thing up as high as possible and get that in the middle. So yeah, quite a low score at 600. It's kind of strange to see a score so incredibly low, particularly nowadays in video games where you get such a massive high score for doing nothing, and there usually isn't even a single thing that could score in a single digit. I suppose we've run into a problem of raised expectations now, where that there certainly are some RPGs out there that do millions upon millions of damage, and the numbers just get ridiculous. And coming back to a more simplistic scoring amount might be interesting. You can see in this old pinball table that there's not any special way to plunge the ball. It just goes up to the top and falls down. You can try and control it a little bit, but that's about it. And being able to get an angle to shoot straight up that center would be fairly difficult. Like, I either hit that or I missed. There's no multi-ball lock in this. Honestly, this table feels a little bit newer than some of the other tables I've seen. Alright, and so you can see the fake high scores here go up to 5,000. I got 1,033. So, what was our standard goals so far? 500 in one ball. Alright. So just get one good ball. That was 300 in one ball. There's definitely something to the argument around nudging. And it's nice that they put the little monkey at on the side, because you can't really see it. Let's see, is there a way to move the camera around? No. Probably is a way to move the camera around. The X button switches this. I probably knew what all these buttons did many years ago. Suffice it to say, I've made myself extremely busy playing other kinds of games and never came back to the more relaxed experience of playing pinball. And I think I have to admit I'm probably a bit of a poser as far as this pinball fanboy. Like, I have nostalgia for it, but I don't think I'm ever was a hardcore enough player that was gonna score really high or actually play for many hours at a time. Yeah. And pinball, in a weird way, is kind of a rich man's game anyways, because you're losing quarters every time you lose, well, until you hit a certain level where you're good enough to win free games consistently. You can hear the table buzzing. Feel like I'm winning free balls. Come on. Well, I don't know how many free balls I've won here. Did I not get 500 points on at least one ball? Interesting. I would have thought I did that. Definitely felt like I'd done that. The trick, clearly, is to try and get the ball back up to the top. That is the safe area. It's all danger in the lower playfield. See, that was 374, so it's not like you're getting ridiculously far away from the goal of 500 points on a single ball. I mean, all I would really need is for it to get a little stuck. And I definitely don't have the hang of the idea of nudging with these controllers. And see, this is a great point to really mention how, like, where you would want to spend that extra $80 to $150 to put in a haptic sensor that could tell when you're nudging a table, if you were going to try and make a virtual pinball table, something that could tell you if you're nudging the actual table forward or backwards or left or right. You would like also a real plunger and not just a button, which that's probably another $80. You would like good quality buttons, which that might set you back a little bit, but not a lot. Like, depending on how many extra buttons and how compatible you want to be. Come on. But then also what you would want is kind of a matte monitor, and it's hard to get matte monitors. And you want one that kind of is the right size and shape, because if you have a small little 22-inch monitor, you're not likely to have the same feeling. And then you probably want to put like glass on top of the monitor, much higher than the monitor, to make it feel like you're looking through glass like a pinball table. And that's extra, so for sure. And it's just never really going to have the same randomness that a real pinball table is. You're never going to have a ball fling up and hit the glass on the glass tabletop like you would have happen fairly often in pinball. You're never going to have some randomness to it. The sound effects made in most pinball tables are not going to be able to be as bassy and realistic as they are for actual pinball tables. I mean, you can get close, but it's still just not going to quite feel it. And that's not even getting to the point of like toys. There's a few backboards and toys and little extra things. Particularly there's one. There's a pinball table based on a tornado movie that has a fan on the top of it, and when you unlock certain modes, it started blowing a fan actually on the player, which was a funny way to mess people up. But if you're going to build a virtual pinball table, which could use this program in these tables, these virtual tables which you've unlocked, you at best are just going to put a second monitor on the backboard to make it display as a backboard. And ironically, there's a thing called a RetroPie you can build using a system on chip computer, which is a really small computer called a Raspberry Pi, and it can emulate pretty much an NES, a Super NES. It can do almost everything up until Nintendo 64, and then it's just not powerful enough to go above that or do most Nintendo 64 games. The difference there, and the reason why the RetroPie works amazingly well for what you're investing and what you're actually looking to get out of it, is because all you need is something to plug into a TV. NES's, Sega Genesis, all the consoles were designed to originally be plugged into a TV anyways, so you're not getting much of a different experience there. So retro fandom for old video games, super easy to emulate. Retro fandom for pinball, on the other hand, not particularly that easy to emulate. So I've done the standard goals. So now you have the wizard goals. Now, am I going to be able to score at least 3,000 points? I don't think so. But in like less than 2 games, really, of playing this, I'm already doing fairly well. Of course, I'm kind of failing miserably with the nudge, and that's where the real advantage on this would be. Is to just, as it's up there, be ready to nudge something up. Darn it. If there is a wizard goal for scoring like 1,000 on one ball, that's probably asking a lot. This is not really much of a table to criticize, and inherently that was the problem of starting with the 60s table, is that this is a very classic pinball table as far as what we would recognize a pinball table as. In all fairness, there is still even older wooden pinball tables that would have been called pinball tables that had maybe just pins in them, and they would be much closer to, say, a pachinko machine than what we would expect from pinball. And there definitely were some like baseball emulating tables where you would just have one flipper and you would simulate shooting baseball. See, green target to 50, earn a special, score at least 1,000 points on one ball. See, yeah. I suppose each of these instructions might give you bits of information, but also take a moment to see that there are 106 lines of dialogue here to point out different things. I could easily imagine if there was a little bit more of a fandom and pinball wasn't kind of a niche product. I could imagine hiring a voice actress, just get a sweet voice actress lady or guy to read out this lines of dialogue and do 2 or 3 takes on 106 lines. There's no pro version on this, so is there anything else we can say or do here? Not really. I think we'll give it one more game, and then we'll call it a day. because yeah, I guess 30 minutes is more than enough. Over the years since I bought this, and I have kind of increasingly gone longer and longer per episode, and that's just in part because of the nature of games being potentially easier to break up in longer sections instead of 30-minute episodes, whereas YouTube itself particularly only wants you to go like 20 minutes at most anyways. But that would be particularly silly. Yeah, I literally would have played one game here, and that would have been it. Or I would have played multiple games and edited the future, edited the footage so that it would look like I was a much better player than I actually am. But there's no point in doing that. I enjoy pinball as I play it, with my own limitations. I don't see a need to try to go pro. Particularly, it'd be silly to try and go pro on a table like this. This is, by modern standards, particularly simplistic and particularly just not something that you would want to go pro with. So now we can see the category here is, this is in the wizard category, and if I'd gotten all of the wizard scores done, it would have gone into the wizard complete category. So the game does do a decent job trying to make it so that you would come back and play. You can also apparently favorite some tables. I don't know what the button would be to specifically favorite a table. And when you come back up to here, you also have your recently played versus the latest release versus the table of the month versus just play random. Now, I do suspect that the pinball wizard playing in the menu might be a problem, so I'm gonna go ahead and mute that, and for the future we'll not bother to go through that. As far as these challenge modes, these would be collections of tables, so that's a secondary way in which you can play a game. But yeah, I suppose we'll keep it here, and we'll leave the cursor here so we know where we are next time, and we'll just end this recording. It is also worth mentioning, I suppose, that Pinball Arcade does, because you're buying the games through DLC, give you a decent amount of achievements for each table. So I have like 289 achievements, or yeah, I think there's a full 300 achievements, and I've unlocked a few already. 4. That's nice and all, but particularly on Steam, it's kind of pointless. Steam only highlights if you get 100% of all achievements. The odds that you're going to get all the achievements on every single table is practically nil. It's a shame that pinball isn't more beloved, but I honestly don't know how you could even bring it back. The tables themselves always took up too much space. They were always too expensive. There's never been an economy of scale implemented well within them at all. There are definitely collectors out there, but you run into a problem. If you put 5 or 6 pinball tables in a room, there's a decent chance your floor will start sagging. They're so heavy. So you can't even really collect them without building a concrete slab somewhere and putting it out in a garage or barn. And they're extremely difficult to maintain and update, and there's just no way. Maybe at some point in the future, if we ever get Star Trek replicator technology where you could just 3D print everything, maybe then it would start to make sense. But until that point, I think pinball is going to forever be stuck in a oddity scenario that you see maybe just on TV and in rich people's apartments, or the occasional arcade if you can find an arcade. But yeah, those are two also dying out. Anyways, not to end on a sour note, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.